like to introduce our speaker today. Wes is a botanist, chief botanist with the NatureServe nonprofit, which I have just learned about, and I'm very excited that he's here to talk to us about that, and plant extinction. So take it away, Wes.
I'm going to slide this way so I don't block the screen for you. So I'm Wes. I live in Fletcher. My kids go to school at East Henderson High in the middle school. I'm a middle school teacher. So this is hyper local for me, which is great. John and I met on an airplane. Where were you going? Like I was going to San Diego, I think.
I was going to Maine, but we had to
hop
over to Charlotte.
Hop over. And I had my laptop up, working on a presentation, and he saw this plant stuff. And he was like, "We just got talking." So I give a lot of talks to like big crowds, but conservation happens locally. So I'm really happy and excited to be talking to locals. I'll talk about some hyper-local plant extinctions, of which both of these are on the screen here. But before I get into that, I'll talk to you about NatureServe. Who here has ever heard of NatureServe? Good, 2-3 people, probably recently though. So NatureServe is a conservation nonprofit that works with over 60 programs across the United States and Canada to make sure we're collecting the same data to determine what plants, animals, and habitats are rare, where those plants, animals, and habitats are found, and to assess them to make sure we can conserve them. Without the data, we can't actually conserve nature. It's kind of underappreciated. It's really sexy to say we bought this place and we're conserving this place, but it's our data that makes you understand that that place is really irreplaceable. So data, everybody's kind of getting bigger into data, which is important, so that's good for us, so people recognize that. So the 60 programs we work with employ over 1,000 conservation professionals. We've assessed over 100,000 species for their extinction risk, and we even classify habitats. Have you ever heard of the National Vegetation Classification, which is a standardized system of naming, the same way we name plants and animals, we name habitats. We've helped develop that system as well. Our data is used predominantly in North America, but we've done projects across the globe, so we have a big footprint. But the methodology we use is pretty simple to understand, but I'll break it down. We rank things at the global level, which is called the G rank. The national level, the N rank. The Canadians use that a lot because they don't have a lot of endemic plants, but they have things at the edge of their range that are only found in a couple places in Canada. And then we have the sub-national rank, or the state rank. Canadians also don't like it when we call the sub-national rank state rank because they don't have states. But we rank them 1 to 5, 1 being critically imperiled with extinction, all the way to 5, which is secure. So like that red maple there, that's a S5, G5 plant. It is very common and secure in the state of North Carolina. It will not go extinct. We're not worried about it. But we have plenty of other plants that are extremely rare, which we'll talk about. This is the standard. You've heard of the IUCN Red List probably. We leave them in the dust here in North America, and we're trying to find ways to work more collaboratively so they can use our ranks to assess extinction risk. So we're the standard for the USA and Canada. Actually, Canada uses our ranks as their federal system of protection. So we have the G and S ranks, the global and state ranks, which are used for conservation decisions. So like Conserving Carolina will buy a piece of property if they have highly ranked globally rare plants and state ranked plants. In North Carolina, the Land and Water Fund uses an equation to figure out what sites they purchase based on the G and S ranks of the plants, animals, and habitats found on that ground. And those G ranks are really informative because we know how rare something is at the global level. So here's a couple of examples. This is our website, NatureServe Explorer. You can type in any species and find out where it is, how common it is. So this is cranberry, Vaccinium macrocarpon. Really common in New England, so you see it's a G5, common secure plant, very common in New England and Canada. But down here in the Carolinas and Tennessee, it's S2, so it's imperiled with extinction. Now, some people think we shouldn't worry about conserving species at the edge of their range. But the reality is the genetics that we have in our cranberry is far more diverse than what they have in New England because of glaciation. Glaciers pushed these plants south, where they're now relict. If you want to conserve the genetics of this plant, you need to conserve the edge of the range. But then we have plants like Ryan's aster. This is a G1S1. It's known from one place in the world. It's found in the Buck Creek Serpentine Barrens of western North Carolina. And if we don't conserve that single place, this plant will go extinct.
You said only place in the world?
It's one place in the world. It actually co-occurs with another plant known from only one place in the world called the serpentine ragwort. And we're describing a third plant known from only one place in the world at this site in western North Carolina. And we have as many as 2 others that may need to be named from this site as well. So we need to find these places and conserve them. So we put this kind of information on the web for people to access. We work with a lot of partners like the Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service to make sure they're conserving these special places. We put forth reports, like I brought one. This is the Biodiversity in Focus report. This made big news last year, where we were able to say 34% of all of our native plants are at risk of extinction. 40% of our animals and 41% of our ecosystems are at risk of collapse. We can do interesting stats where you can break it down by group, like cacti, 48% again. You know, grasses, sedges, and rushes, not so many, but you get the idea. We have it broken down by color code. Red is G1, orange is G2, and yellow is G3, which we call at risk of extinction. So this is the kind of data that makes our conservation decisions impactful. And we can even do big land level analysis to identify areas with the most at-risk species that need conservation. You'll see Western North Carolina has a lot of those things. So this map appeared in the New York Times a couple of years ago. So our websites, we have this NatureServe Explorer website and a new one, NatureServe Explorer Pro, where we put this data out for the public, so feel free to look at that. I have some business cards here, you can just scan it. It'll take you to our website. And this is the Explorer page you'll enter, where you'll type in your plant and find information on it. So my background. So I graduated from Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina in 2001. And I landed my dream job. I got a field botanist position with the Maryland Natural Heritage Program. My job was to go out and find special places. How cool is that? How scary is that? All of a sudden I was the guy in charge of finding. I never lived in Maryland before. So I studied the Rare Plants of Maryland book night and day, because this is what I needed to know, what was rare, to identify the special places. And these are really dry. These are just lists of names by scientific name. We'll throw in the common name sometimes. But then we have what we mentioned before, global rank, S rank. This is the state status, endangered or threatened. And then you'll see none of these plants have a federal status. But the plant that captured my imagination was this plant here, Nautilus micranthemum, micranthemoides. Because it was the only plant that was GH, globally historical, or extinct, or presumed extinct. And I didn't realize extinct plants were near me, where I was living in Maryland. I thought it was like a problem of the tropics or the rainforest. So I was like, I'm going to find this plant. Well, spoiler alert, I didn't find it because it's extinct. But you have to look to be certain. But I learned everything I could about this plant. This is it. It's the opposite of charismatic megafauna. It's this little diminutive plant that occurred between high and low tide in mud flats. It was last seen 13th of September 1941. This is one of the last known collections. He actually collected 3 specimens, Fernald, Long, and it was just Fernald and Long. And they found it along the Chickahominy River in Virginia, and it was the last time it was ever seen. We didn't even know this was rare, and then it was the last time it was ever seen.
Was the river farm area? Or
well, so this plant actually ranged from New York to Virginia. It's one of our widest ranging extinct plants. This probably went extinct because of the death by 1,000 cuts. You have riprap of shoreline, invasive species like Phragmites, channelizations of river, agriculture, maybe even a non-native lichen or algae. So we have a lot of pressures that happened with this. But the river system, the Chickahominy, is still very high quality. And that river's been searched repeatedly over and over again, and we cannot find this plant. So it got me thinking, go ahead.
Does everybody know what Phragmites is? Because I don't.
Phragmites australis is Phragmites. It's an invasive grass. It stands like this tall. Stands like this tall. It just makes dominant carpets and wetlands.
Grass chased this out.
It probably in part,
Yeah.
but it was also multiple things that caused the extinction of this plant. So because I got infatuated with this plant, I talked to other botanists in their states. What's extinct in your state? What's extinct in your state? People wouldn't know. Like, how do we not know what's extinct? Because if we're going to conserve nature, we've got to know what we lost and why we lost it. So it took me many years, but I led this paper with all these co-authors on the extinct plants of the United States and Canada. This is freely available on Conservation Biology's website. Produced this nice map of where these extinct plants were. In this blue hatch, that's where that Nautilus micranthemum was found. It was wide-ranging from the Hudson River down to southeastern Virginia. Each red dot is a single point where these extinct plants were now occurring. Most of them are mapped just at a single place. They were very rare inherently, and now they're extinct, except for this hawthorn tree that was here. So that we found 65 extinct taxa since European settlement. It's 51 species and 14 infra-specific taxa or varieties or subspecies. We're going to call them all species for ease of use. So we have 65 extinct plants. We have 5 that are extinct in the wild. They're still found in gardens today. And that was one of the surprises. These gardens didn't even know sometimes they had the last individual known in the world. And what we also found, which is really interesting, that 64% of all these extinct plants are known from just one place. We call them single-site endemics, like that Buck Creek plant I just referenced, who's known from just one place. So what we learned is we have to protect plants of this extreme rarity. if we're going to prevent extinctions, and nature service data is how we can do that. Let's talk hyper-locally for a minute. North Carolina is unfortunately an extinction hotspot. We didn't know that until this paper came out, and I'll talk about these two, then we'll jump into the third one. So first, the big lead, this dot for clarity is actually in Tennessee. So we're going to talk about these here in Henderson and Polk County. So this is the big leaf scruff pea, or Bexillum macrophyllum. That's one of the 2 known specimens of this plant. Everyone recognizes this as different and now gone. It was at the very tip of Tryon and White Oak Mountain, not far from here as you come up the Blue Ridge Escarpment. My hypothesis is that it was at the very top of the mountain in an open woodland, and that's all now houses and been destroyed. I've hiked around a lot. I've had friends who've hiked around a lot. We're still hopeful. Maybe it's out there somewhere, because it's a very distinct looking plant if you're a botanist. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to find it. Here's the label, collected in 1897. And it just says White Oak Mount Tryon. That's all we get to go on. A lot of these old labels really weren't that detailed. Maybe it's still out there someday. Maybe y'all know a landowner up there and you can get out there and find this thing. I don't know.
So that picture that you had, those were flowers that could have gone to seed?
So these are the flower stalks here. These are early flowers, so there's no seed on this. And this is called a herbarium specimen, so the plants are dried, mounted with a label, like this is at the New York Botanical Garden. And if it wasn't for this voucher, we wouldn't even know this plant ever existed. And we'll talk about dark extinctions a little later. What's really neat is we have, like here's a Tryon Peak, and there's a lot of nice looking habitat. Like that could still be there. I don't know, I haven't been out there. We also have this really interesting letter where he sent this to New York, and the guy at New York's like, I've never seen this. This is completely new to science. So if it wasn't for that communication, we probably would have lost these plants. But again, the books all will just say in woods, Tryon Mountain. Maybe we'll still find that someday.
Field trip.
But the other one, and this is hyper-local, the mountain bog asphodel, Narthecium montanum. Now, I'm going to introduce you to the extant, which is the opposite of extinct. The extant member of Narthecium in North America, which is Narthecium americanum. This is the bog asphodel. It's found in New Jersey with some frequency. It's been lost in Delaware, lost in South Carolina, so it's restricted now to New Jersey. It's a beautiful plant. Like you couldn't walk past that. These styles are fimbriose, or almost hairy. There's a county level distribution map. I've seen this in New Jersey. It's a really remarkable plant. There's a sister species to this called Narthecium montanum. That was it's not true. This is only in one county, and the site was probably 1.5 miles from here, under the GE plant or somewhere near about that. See, I'm fascinated that plant people do not know these stories here in our backyard. So I knew about this plant for a long time because I knew the sister species from New Jersey. And when my wife got a job at East Flat Rock at the middle school, I realized she's working right near the old historic East Flat Rock Bog. This is amazing. I'm going to explore and see what I can find. Fortunately, this is another one I couldn't find. Like you just have bogs near Flat Rock. That's all it says. Swamps near Flat Rock, 1819, and that's Creighton. That was Biltmore's botanist. That was Vanderbilt's botanist who collected these specimens. And I think this is the last known specimen. No, it's not. It says swamp near Flat Rock, North Carolina. There's the last specimen, but there's a nice letter on there that gives a little detail about where it was and what it could be. And we'll come back to this letter because there's something even more exciting from that letter we'll talk about. But this is the last specimen here. It even says plant now apparently extinct. And that letter talks about cattle destroying the wetlands at this bog. So a bog is a low wetland. And the term bog is more correctly used in like the northern United States. We have fens, but we call them bogs. We don't need to go into that road. But what I found interesting is this actually says type locality, which is meant where the specimen was described in science from. Bog margin 1 mile south of Flat Rock Station. And that's way more information than we previously had. So I began, I'm like, I'm gonna find this plant. Again, not so lucky, but you gotta look. So I did a little detective work, right? So little Charleston of the Mountains, what they used to call Flat Rock Station. There's a picture. It ran from Spartanburg to Asheville via Flat Rock and started in 1879. And the station was torn down in 1859, but it's located where the post office is in Flat Rock now. And this is very similar
In
to
East Flat Rock.
In
There is a
East
distinction
Flat
there.
Rock. You are absolutely correct. In East Flat Rock. Especially here, I better get that right. So in East Flat Rock. But the same thing happened in Delaware, in Maryland, where I used to work, botanists would come into the area on the railroad. They would see incredible places. Then they'd go back to those places and explore. So the idea that this plant was only discovered because a railroad went past it and botanists could see it is mind-boggling in and of itself. But the label says 1 mile east of Flat Rock Station. Word of mouth put this bog under, this is the GE plant. So the word of mouth has always been it's over here somewhere. And there's some nice wetlands back here under a power line. But I looked at this and I'm like, no, no, no. This was along the railroad track 1 mile from the station. So if you follow the railroad track back, it puts you to this big open wet spot with a bunch of cow where they still are today. I don't know who owns this. I need to start knocking on some doors. I got a feeling it's all destroyed.
Do
but
it quickly because they're talking about putting houses there.
Oh, Lord.
That's the area, right? So I expect this is where it could be, because there's a bunch of other, we call them East Flat Bog Rod relics. Here, where there's a bunch of rare plants still clinging to these special habitats. But it wasn't just this one. This area was really special. I'm going to run through some of the really rare stuff that were found here. So these are county level distribution maps for North America. So this is Sweet Gale, Mirica Gale, only found here still in eastern, like southeastern United States here. There's a bog along King Creek where this is still found, but it was found with some frequency, at least in the East Flat Rock area. We have the New Jersey rush, Juncus caesariensis, which is still somewhat common in New Jersey, but then jumps to one place only in western North Carolina. I think this is a wrong error also. This is a federally listed plant as threatened. It's so endangered with extinction. Carex baradii, the Barrett's sedge with these beautiful glaucous and dark paraginia. You'll see this is rare about everywhere but here in the mid-Atlantic. It was jumped here but recently rediscovered in central North Carolina, which is exciting. We have a showstopper here, the dragon's mouth orchid, Arethusa bulbosa. There's only one place in North Carolina for this, but this used to be at the East Flat Rock Bog as well and was recently rediscovered in upstate South Carolina. So there's still hope for some of these plants. One of my favorites, the swamp pink, Helonius bullata. This is also federally listed because it's so rare. Pretty common in the Pine Barrens and in Delaware. Then it jumps to the mountains where it used to be found here in East Flat Rock, but still found in Nantahala National Forest. Common sedge, really bad name, very common in the west and in Canada and the northeast, but then it jumps way down to the south here. So we were like a relict of all these rare plant species reaching their southern limit. This is the bunched arrowhead, only known from 2 counties in the world now. Wow. There's even plants of this that were found on Blue Ridge Community College campus last year by a colleague of mine. It's so common though, it's only in our category of G2, because where you find it, you find thousands of individuals. This was probably co-evolved with like megafauna, like bison, that churned the soil. We find this now literally where heavy equipment gets stuck in the mud and they have to pull it out. This plant can sometimes show up. It's just absolutely fascinating. And then we'll talk about Marshallia grandiflora next, the large flowered barbarous buttons, which runs from Pennsylvania to Tennessee, but was found here in western North Carolina as well. Now, I mentioned this specimen with this long letter on it of Narthekium montana and the mountain bog asphodel. And one of the things they mention in this letter, you will find also a specimen of Marshallia grandiflora from the same region showing a peculiarity I have never before noticed. That is, the flowers vary from rosy purple to white. And usually when a good botanist is like, this is confusing to me, that's a red flag. So when I moved to North Carolina, I moved from Maryland, so I worked in the Maryland Heritage Program for 15 years. Then I worked as a mountain botanist here for 5 years. I got my master's degree while I worked in Maryland, and now I'm finishing my PhD at UNC Chapel Hill under Alan Weekly. When I first moved here, I saw this plant on our rare plant list because again, oh my God, I'm in charge of finding all these plants by site and protecting spaces. I was shocked that this plant was found here. I knew this plant from Pennsylvania. We call this a G3, so it's not extremely rare, but it's not common. In Pennsylvania, you don't have a lot of plants that are that rare. But this is found on very large energy river systems, what we call river scour habitat, where the water comes up in the spring, scours out all those trees, and keeps it open almost prairie-like. So I pulled up some specimens. I about fell out of my chair. This is the stuff from North Carolina, and this is the stuff they were confusing it with from the Northeast. Like these are 2 different plant species that were under our nose and we didn't know it. So we did a big study. Like the seeds are really different. These are the plants from North Carolina. These are the plants from Pennsylvania, and this is another species related to it from central North Carolina. I'm not going to go into the statistics, but we have some statistics arguing that there are 3 morphologically distinct species in this group. They fall out beautifully in range as well. So this is what was being called Marshallia grandiflora, which was a candidate for federal listing. This is the stuff from North Carolina. And this is a thing my colleagues described a couple of years ago from very special habitats in the Piedmont of North Carolina and Virginia, only known from 2 places in the world. So what we found out is this plant from Western North Carolina is extinct. And it hadn't been recognized as different. So it was lost for over 100 years before anyone realized it was a different species entirely. And that co-occurred at the East Flat Rock Bog, but it was found in Polk and Henderson County. So we have 3 extinct plants from right here. This is one of the hottest spots for extinction that we know about in eastern North America. And here's the 3 species side by side. They really look different. Like the flowering heads are big, the leaves are much longer, the leaves are wider, the habitat was different. This is a high energy river. This is in diabase glades, like a rocky habitat. So we had to write a paper, and we described the one from like Pennsylvania that's still extant or not extinct, the Marshallia pulchra, the beautiful barber's buttons. Because those Biltmore botanists described Marshallia grandiflora into science, so that name only applies to our material. There's a bunch of scientific legalese we don't need to get into, but we were stuck with that name, and these are all the specimens we've ever known of this plant. Henderson County, bogs of swamps, Muddy Creek, 1881. Damp soil in Hendersonville, 1889. That's specimens from the Smithsonian. These are from the New York Botanical Gardens. Near Flat Rock, New York Botanical Gardens. Polk County, dry soil near Saluda. I think that meant seasonally wet, but then became dry. So even our how we named habitats has greatly changed over the years, and our habitat definitions are getting better. Then we have this strange specimen with no county on it by somebody named Nichols. I don't know. No, I think Nichols is the location, and it says Hines was the collector, New York Botanical Garden. We don't know what to do with that. We put that there. Maybe someday someone will figure out what that means.
So no longitude, no latitude?
No, this is before those are common language. I mean, I've seen specimens that say Maryland and Virginia. You're like, I don't even know what state to look in. So it's really hard. Those are the challenges of knowing something's extinct. You can't prove a negative, right? Like, is the ivory-billed woodpecker gone?
No.
People don't agree, and that's a giant bird that flies around and makes a ton of noise. These plants sit still. Like, you have to be on top of them to identify them. So it's much harder to know if something's truly extinct or it's just we don't know where to look. So I like to call them all presumed extinct, because hope springs eternal. But we have this whole category of things we call dark extinctions. These are extinctions that happened before the plants were described into science. And that was the story of Marshallia grandiflora, that barber's buttons that was found down the road. It was last collected in 1919. It wasn't until 2020 that we published it as a new species. So it had already been gone 101 years before it was recognized as distinct. And since 1994, 4 plants in North America have been dark extinctions of many years. Like some of these are, I used to have a column here that had the years, I'm not going to do the math. But the point is these come from across the country, so this was the Pacific Northwest. This is an orchid from Florida that was collected to extinction before they realized it was distinct. We have the Marshallia I just talked about, and then in the west we have a cinquefoil that was 53 years since it went extinct. It was just known from the herbarium specimens. But how are we going to turn the tide on extinction now that we know extinction is happening at a rapid rate? We're going to describe our flora. We still have to describe our flora. We're still discovering new plants. I published this paper in April. This is a new juncus or rush that's known from just a couple places in Georgia. We call this juncus snowy eye after a person who spent their career protecting the Altamaha grit. That is a sandstone formation in the coastal plain. And this plant will probably never be found outside of these 2 counties. And this is a G1 plant. We're still describing very rare plants. And if we can't describe our plants, we can't conserve them. We're even working on many projects right now to name undescribed species. If you've ever used Weekly's Flora of the Southeastern United States, which is available free on the UNC's website, he'll list the undescribed plants we know about as species 1, species 2. But it takes a long time to describe them to science. You need data, you need pictures, you need to write reports, you have to get submitted, they have to get peer reviewed, they have to get accepted, and then it costs money to do all this. So there's a large entry, but we still need to describe our plants. We also need to keep looking for extinct plants. So in 2020, D2, I was part of a team that went to Big Bend, Texas, and we rediscovered this oak that was thought to be extinct. We spent a week down in the canyons of Big Bend looking for what was called the late-leaved oak, Quercus tardifolia. It was the last individual died in 2007. It was presumed extinct. We literally stayed on site for a week and found one tree. Since then, Kelsey Wogan, this woman here in front, part of plant inventory is a good search image to know what to look for. And the guy who found this one, Michael, Adam, and I were the only ones who studied the original specimens of this tree. So we had an idea of what to look for other than it looks weird. So Kelsey, now that she saw this tree, has found 2 more trees at a ranch about 100 miles away. So now we have 3 total trees. So what are we doing? We're making cuttings, doing graftings, building up the collection, trying to get some genetic diversity. Now we have options. What do we do with this living material? We haven't made decisions yet. This is in the national parks. There's a lot of permits, a lot of rules, but that's not my decision. That's a community of scientists to make that decision.
Are these all professionals or volunteers or both?
These are professionals. So that's me. That's Michael Easton from the San Antonio Botanic Garden. That's Adam Black, who works now at Bartlett Tree Services in Charlotte. He's their director of plant conservation. Emily is with Californian University, as was Shara. Elizabeth is now a graduate student at University of Georgia. He was at Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and U.S. Botanic Garden. So we pulled a team of experts together who are good at oaks, were good in the field, because this wasn't cool. It was Texas. We were very remote. We saw more black bear than I could count. We saw venomous snakes. We saw bobcat. We saw cougar scat. Like, it's real. Like, we romanticize field work as like, oh, I'm going out for a walk in the park. That's not what we're doing. Like, we had a reporter, like, there was a really nice story that made the New Republic. The first year we went and looked and didn't find it. But this reporter was unprepared, and she got really destroyed, sunburned, insects, bites, blood from the cacti and all the things. But we spent a week and we were able to rediscover this tree, which is really exciting. So we need to keep looking for our extinct plants. So hopefully someone's going to find some of those things from the old East Flat Rock Bog someday. But then we need to prioritize. And that's what my career, I want to spend the rest of my career doing, is prioritizing to prevent plant extinction. Like, we're in the midst of the 6th grade extinction, they call it. So I began this project to identify plants that are known from just one place. Like I mentioned, those single-site endemics are the most likely to go extinct. So this will be submitted for publication, I hope, in a couple weeks. It's really close. This is a chapter of my dissertation. But we're trying to find plants that are known from just one place. That includes plants that are endemic to one place or plants that have declined to a single place, because they tell us different things. This is a map of all the plants that are known from just one place. We're still waiting on the data from Hawaii, but I got it like literally Monday. I just haven't incorporated it into the talk yet. And we have a lot of work to do. 53% of these are on unprotected land. They could go extinct because plants are the property of the landowner. Even if they're federally listed, the landowner can destroy them unless they need some other kind of permit. Only 15 of these are on the Endangered Species Act. So policy isn't going to save us. We have to act to prevent the extinction of these species. And I want to raise their importance because they're irreplaceable components of biodiversity. All their eggs are in one basket. So if we don't act, they will go extinct. And frankly, there's no reason any plant should go extinct. We just have to have the motivation to do something about it and decide to do something about it. We can grow them. Conservation gardening is a really important thing. We need to keep our genetics of these rare species locked off-site as a safety net, because some of these sites will be destroyed. There's a plant in Nevada that is on Bureau of Land Management land that is federally listed, but it's the place of a lithium mine. And it may still go extinct, despite the fact it's on federal land and it has a policy protection to it, because we value one thing greater than the continuation of a species on this planet. So we just have to decide that we don't want these to go extinct and act. And that's all I got for you today. Here's my personal website, wesley-knapp.com. You can see a bunch of stuff at NatureServe's website. This is a photo of Trillium georgianum, which was described just a few years ago, known from one place in the planet. It's a QR code that will take you to our website and our donation page. We are a nonprofit. You'd think the feds would just give us money to do this because they need our data, but they don't. It's just the hard reality of what we do. But I'm here. I live locally. I brought some business cards if you want to reach out. I have a couple strategic plans. I brought that BIF report, and then I have one of our annual reports with a nice rare plant map of the United States and Canada. And each state, territory, or province picked out their own plant. So we represented them at their level. So thank you for having me, and I'm open to questions.
So NatureServe, does it provide volunteer opportunities?
So we have some volunteers. They do a lot of georeferencing of herbarium specimens. So for instance, we're always trying to update the names and what those names mean in our database. So let's say a new species is discovered and it splits one species into two species. Now you have to untangle what was under this one big mess into two new things. And oftentimes we have volunteers who will sit with the data and the research and be able to take the herbarium specimens and map them with high accuracy. Because the way you create a rank has to do with rarity, threats, and trends. And we have a rank calculator on our website that you can put your data into and it'll tell you the rank. But one of the things we look at is the area of occupancy and the extent of occurrence, which is how many 2 by 2 kilometer grid cells does this plant or animal occupy across the landscape, and where are those points on the ground. So the only volunteer opportunities we do are that kind of database stuff, but our member programs, like the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, who I used to work with, they will often look for volunteers to do just updates on rare species records, or we have a registry program in North Carolina. If you're a private landowner or a public landowner, you can register your site as a natural area. And every so often, we just need a basic check-it on a site. And we have volunteers who will check registries for us. So it's mostly at the member program level. And if we have a South Carolina Natural Heritage Program, North Carolina program, Tennessee, like every state has a program. So if you're not here in North Carolina, you have opportunity to volunteer with that program directly. And then we're always looking for better data on the-ground locations. So if you collect plant data through like iNaturalist, for instance, which is a great app. A lot of our programs in NatureServe itself mines iNaturalist data looking for new rare plant records or rare animal records that aren't in our collected databases. Because that's how you get things conserved. You have to know where they are to prevent like a housing development. Yeah.
So that was that area where he was talking about with the houses. So across the street, kind of from the cow farm, is a manufactured home development. So I'm wondering, well, so we don't know who owns that land.
Yeah, I know someone with the NRCS who thinks they know the landowner now. Because we've been kind of slow working this one. But frankly, any wet open area in this area should be inspected for the plants that occur in it. Like if you leave from the high school, you take a left towards the interstate, there's like a newly cleared bit of land and they ditched the stream. I would love to explore that stream because that's where that bunched arrowhead could show up. It really likes getting its teeth kicked in.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, what if you had volunteers to follow you?
Hey, look, this is part of the process, right? Is I want to talk hyper locally, put some rare species on your idea, like on your radar, some things to look for, get people engaged and looking.
Carol's ready to go right now.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. I got to change my shoes.
I was gonna say, change my shoes.
That's right. That's right.
Go.
But they're like Conserving Carolina does like walks to some of their natural areas. You'll get to see rare plants. The Heritage Program will sometimes do walks to expose you to rare species. I know the U.S. Forest Service does rare plant hikes occasionally. So it's all about just building these networks on what are the rare species, what do we need to look for, and the boots on the ground are thin. We need poor people who know what they're looking for, because it's easy to walk past something and never recognize it as rare. It shouldn't take an expert. Now, thankfully, the plant apps are getting a lot better. Right? If you put a picture on iNat, even if it's wrong, I can stand at my house on a Sunday night and be like, oh no, that's a really important record. And I've done that for a lot of people who put records on iNaturalist and help them clarify what they have and found very important places to conserve. So that's like where the citizen science cloud sourcing of what we do kind of comes into full tilt. Yeah.
So when you identify the areas with like a one-off plant, something like
Yeah.
that, what's the next steps? I know you said with the oaks you guys started propagating, things like that.
It's all dependent on, like the species you're talking about. So like I talked about the Ryan's aster, Symphreotricum rhiannon, which my friend Alan named after his daughter, because she was colicky and she started crying, and they made him stop, and they were like, well, what is this aster? So they named it after her because it made him stop and pay attention. It's like this is found in a very special place at the U.S. Forest Service, where we have 2 single-site endemics that co-occur. Now, the Forest Service botanist knows about this site, so it's on their radar as a conservation priority. And that's really important to make sure a landowner knows what they have and how special it is, because there's often a disconnect. They might not realize you have the last ones. If something's endemic to a place, they probably have an understanding of that. But let's say you had 4 locations for a plant that's reduced to 1 site. They might not realize they have the last one. And that's where our education, like that paper is gonna come out with like all the data as clearly as we can. We're gonna reach out to landowners. We're gonna try to get sites. We're gonna try to motivate the community, because like there's two major fields of conservation. There's on the ground conservation, which we call in situ, and then there's off-site conservation, which is ex situ. So that ex situ, that safety net, we need to develop, because most of these are missing from that safety net. So if something happened to that site, the species would be gone. But if we have it in a seed bank, now you have to know how to grow it. Then you have to know how to get it to adulthood. Then you need to know how to get it to reproduce. So there's a million little mysteries you have to figure out. But if we're not trying, we're never going to be successful. So that to me is just about where I kind of feel like plant conservation isn't prioritized the way it needs to be. So we're trying to prioritize it to the things that are most likely to go extinct unless we act as soon as possible. And I've learned that even working with Hawaii. Like they have a preventing plant extinction program. Most of their flora, they only have 1,300 native plants in Hawaii. 10% of them are extinct. They have 130 extinct plants in Hawaii. So they've been on the front line of plant extinction for a long time. They're beating us in many meaningful ways. Most of their rarest plants are in seed banks. Most of them, because their habitats are being so transformed, they can't even fight the battle anymore in nature. But they have more time because now they have it off-site. And that's the kind of mindset we need to start thinking about here with some of these plants before they're gone. So it's a case-by-case, species-by-species decision. But that my goal is just to get as much of the community motivated as possible so we have multi-fronts to prevent the next extinction.
So is somebody collecting some seeds from there in the fall?
Yeah, this one and the serpentine ragwort, I brought this up to my colleagues at the North Carolina Botanical Garden and I shamed them. It was like, if y'all don't have it, who's gonna? Like, you should have an exhibit about these. Your director described this new to science. There's a story here. So they're finally getting, this is on camera, sorry, Mike. It's the kind of thing that's like, we want to draw attention. And if I need to, I can lean on people like Mike Kuntz is the new director of conservation. They're like, why don't you have this? And one of the answers, it's a little weedy in the garden. And I'm like, that's too bad. This is what conservation is about. It's not necessarily about beauty, it's about keeping these species.
Yeah, pull some volunteers.
Preventing this. And this is a pretty one. This is like used to be aster. These are Symphyotricums now. They're beautiful plants. Now it's not going to be the kind of thing you're going to find in the garden because it needs this serpentivized olivine, which is a rock, very rare. It used to be an ancient ocean floor bottom, and when the collision of Africa and the continental landmass uplift, we have serpentine rock that exposes like here, there's here, and then there's more in the northeast and then western United States. So we just don't get serpentine here, which is why we have these very rare endemic plants here, because they evolved in these very special places, because there's nowhere else that this plant could even be found. So it's kind of like an island.
Where's that serpentine rock near us?
That's out here. This is in the Buck Creek Serpentine Barrens on Nantahala National Forest. And this is a special place. I could talk just about this place. I remember the first time I went there, I was driving down the road and like, where is this place? And then the whole flora changed. I'm like, oh, I'm here. And then like this is pretty common there. That ragwort is very common there. The other plant we're describing, a heartleaf, is very common there. And for a long time, we just thought they were things from the West that happened to be here until you put them side by side and realize, well, that's a new species. And it's just been, we're not trained to assume everything is different. That's dangerous. And then so we're re-examining these areas of single-site endemics like the Buck Creek Serpentine Barrens. It's about 2.5 hours, 2 hours from here. It's a pretty nice hike though. A lot of special plants. It could be a fun field trip someday.
Yeah. Gotta start doing that.
Take me to go on a hike.
And Gary Kaufman.
Create it. Sure.
Gary Kaufman is the U.S. Forest Service botanist who oversees the National Forest. He's in Asheville. He routinely gives hikes there. He's also a member of like the Asheville Mushroom Club. So he's like part of the local community and understands the need to connect locally. I've led hikes to Buck Creek. He's led hikes to Buck Creek. And it's an area of global conservation impact to have something like that here.
What's his name again?
Gary Kaufman, Kauffman. And when we're done, we expect there to be at least 4 plants endemic to just that spot, which will be the outlier for the United States and Canada. And frankly, that's where you'd expect it. As like flowering plants evolved a long time ago. But the southern Appalachians hadn't been under ice or they hadn't been underwater since flowering plants evolved. And evolution takes time and special habitats, and you get both of those here at that Serpentine Barren. So finding 4 or 5 single site endemics to this space makes a lot of sense.
So interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Any other questions?
I just want to say that Parks and Rec are doing hikes this year. Corey Blackwell's leading a bunch of hikes in the county of a bunch of different Conserving Carolina areas and things like that if you're interested.
What's the website,
Where
what's
do we
the
look?
site?
Henderson County Parks and Rec.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Parks and Recreation. And Corey Blackwell is the sort of contact person for that.
In Conserving Carolina would probably have some hikes throughout the year
Yep.
too.
Yep, she's actually, Emma, one of the people from Conserving Carolina, has been joining us on those hikes too. She comes out and talks about their management practices, things like that as well.
Yeah, they own some very special places.
They do, yeah.
Because the way this works is that they will identify a place and they'll submit it to the state's Land and Water Fund. And then like my previous job, I would go out to that site and look around and see what I could find. And then anything I found special would go into the database and then it would get scored. And every site gets scored against every other site. But the G rank and the S rank of those plants and animals are what dictates what's get funded. So when I was working in North Carolina, my job was to go out, inventory, and get places protected. It was really rewarding. I worked with Conserving Carolina quite a bit to help find special places and conserve them.
So, beginning of May, there was something I shared with some people, that 175 acres were given to Green River Game Lands to conserve.
Yeah, I might have even been on that
Yeah.
property.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So those families donated that land?
I don't know the story there, but usually you can't protect something unless there's a willing landowner,
That's what it says.
which is always,
A small part of it was purchased and then the rest was donated from the.
3 different owners.
it was probably an easement, a conservation easement on the remaining properties.
That's just beautiful.
Yeah, and you guys are very lucky to have the infrastructure for conservation that you have here. You have a lot of conservation organizations. Coming from Maryland, I saw special places get destroyed because it was outside of a focal area. Like that's one of the reasons I wanted to work on these plants of one known occurrence, is I was watching places get destroyed because they weren't in a focal area. It's like, well, plants didn't evolve for our focal areas. They're where they are. And if we don't adapt how we're operating, we're going to see extinctions. And we just have to decide if we're going to do that. And I would say we shouldn't. And hopefully this information will help guide us to a better conservation future. All right, well, thanks for having me today. That was fun. I'll be back at some point.